basketball podcast today. Me and Nick here will be our 2022 Big 12 predictions. There's timestamps below if you guys want to skip around. We'll be discussing our top 4 teams in depth. And then to cap things off, we'll talk about all teams. Not as extensively, but every team will get talked about. And then some awards and the conference title predictions to wrap things up. Get things started, Nick. 10-2 Oklahoma. Brett Venables comes over, brings a heck of a staff with him, and Jeff Lebby as the OC. I have them losing to Nebraska early on in the year. 10 wins. I don't know if this team is going to be a 10-win team, but the schedule is not overly tough, the conference they play in. They seem like they are just more talented than the teams they're playing right now. Dillon Gabriel comes over, reunites with Jeff Lebby. Bulk of his numbers came over the first 2 years. Didn't play much last year due to an injury. 8K career yards, 70 touchdowns, 14 picks. I like Gabriel. Good arm motion, nice footwork. Throws the ball. He can throw off platform. Makes plays when the pocket breaks down. Pretty good guy as a runner as well. They lose Spencer Rattler and Caleb Williams. They get the ideal replacement here. And again, with Lebby, the sky's the limit for these guys. I look at the running back core, though, as well. DeMarco Murray's the coach. Eric Gray, he stays put. 713 yards, 4 touchdowns last year. A dynamic dual-threat guy. Didn't nearly have the season I thought he would running the ball. The running game as a whole, though, Nick, was very disappointing. The offensive line was a big reason why. Marcus Major, he only played in 2 games, really. 5'11", 222. He's a powerful runner. Javante Barnes, a top 10 running back in the class of 2022, 200-plus pounds himself, more of an inside worker. I like the running back group. The offensive line's going to have to be better, though. We'll talk about them here in a minute. Wide receiver group, he was one of the best in the nation last year in terms of depth and talent. Not so much anymore. There was 4 of the top 6 pass catchers in terms of production. That doesn't include Austin Stogner, who's a good player for them as well. They lack size tremendously, Nick. That's the one drawback they have. Farouk, he's 203 pounds. He's probably the biggest in terms of weight. Theo Weiss is 6'2", is the tallest. Drummond, he had plenty of that at Ole Miss, and he was a star for them. So they didn't have that luxury. They don't have the luxury here, though. Marvin Mims, though, he stays put. Big time decision from him, and he stays put. Deep threat guy. He's got speed. He's a leader, and he was the leader in yards the first 2 seasons for Oklahoma. Theo Weiss, he didn't play last year. He can make plays downfield. Cody Jackson transfers out. Overall, this offense, they have upside because they have some talent, but they're not as deep as they were under Lincoln Riley. They quickly lost a lot of talent, and Jeff Lebby's got his hands full this year.
The talent gap is certainly there for this Oklahoma offense. It's nowhere near what we're used to out of the Sooners. Dillon Gabriel comes over from UCF. I think this is a solid fit. Dillon Gabriel was at UCF, solid player there, had a decent career. He comes over here. He heads over this offense. I think that he's a solid stopgap quarterback. They're going to have to hit the recruiting trail hard to get a new quarterback in the future. I do like him as sort of a positional hold for now. I think he's a solid quarterback. Marvin Mims, getting him back, that's the key to all this. Without Mims, this wide receiving core would be completely depleted. You're looking at a lot of names we don't recognize. I expect big things out of Marvin Mims this year. I think he should break 1,000 yards. Had about 700 last year. Solid wide receiver, 5 touchdowns last year as well for Mims. I like him a lot. I also think Drake Stoops should be involved a little bit more this year. Son of former head coach Bob Stoops. I like Drake Stoops a lot. I think he's talented, good player in that wide receiver Z role. Like to see him step it up a little bit this year, though. The running back core, like you said, not too bad at all. I think these guys are talented. They have a bunch of variety here. Gray should lead the load here. 5.3 yards per carry last year. Not a bad number for him. This offense will not be as good as it used to, but I think it's still a solid offense with some good pieces.
They do add a handful of guys late. J.J. Hester from Missouri, L.V. Bunkley Shelton from Arizona State. So they did get some guys in the portal to work with Tyler Guyton as well. So early on in the preseason, it was a bit of a concern with Tyler Guyton's a left tackle, rather, but there's some concerns altogether in terms of depth on this offense. I think they're kind of making things work, at least here in the short term. Looking at that offensive line, Bill Biedenbaugh stays. That's a big-time return for this football team and the staff. Anton Harrison, a left tackle. He's probably one of the best at his position in the conference. Andrew Ram, I like him at center. He was one of my breakout players from a season ago, and I think he's definitely earned his stripes. Chris Murray, Robert Tongo, those are 2 guys that I targeted last year that transferred into the program. We'll see what they do. Bray Walker hasn't exactly lived up to his potential. Neither is Wanya Morris. He was very disappointing last year. But Walker, big guy, 6'6", 320-plus pounds. They also add McCade Couture from California. I think this offensive line, Nick, has a lot of upside. They got talented backs that can work. So I want to see more room. I want to see better pass protection. Do they have the pieces to get it done? Because I think in the short term, I'd say they do, especially with some of these guys like Murray and Congo getting involved into the lineup.
I think there are certainly pieces here to develop a strong offensive line for Oklahoma. I think Harrison and Metior on the left side are solid at left tackle and left guard. I like Andrew Ram in the middle, super strong center. I love the size he has, good experience as a junior. I think Robert Congo as well could kind of fight for that interior role, maybe at right guard, slot him at right guard. This is a talented offensive line. I think these pieces return a lot of experience here. I think this is what they have to have in Oklahoma. I like the experience this offensive line has.
Lebby loves to run the ball, but it'd be hard if this offensive line can't get better. If they were the way they were last year, we'd be very interested in this offense because they want to move fast by running the ball. And the offensive line is really the key to everything this season. Looking at the defense, this Ted Roof, 6 different stops in 6 years. He can be the defensive coordinator along with 2 other guys. D-line was disappointing last year. 33 sacks isn't a bad number, but it was a decrease. The Iowa State game was the only time I thought they were elite. They showed the potential that I thought they would have all year long. The run defense was fairly good. Only 4 games where they allowed 150-plus yards, 200-plus only once, and that was against Baylor. I like this interior D-line, though, Nick. Jalen Redmond, one of the top interior pass rushers, very nimble for 6'3", 279. He had 8 tackles for loss last fall, 11 in 2019. He didn't play in 2020. They're happy to get him back in the lineup as a full-time starter here. Jeffrey Johnson at nose. He had a lot of production there at Tulane, slimmed down a good bit from 330 to 295. I think that this is going to be a very good interior D-line that Venables has to work with. He also got guys like Corey Robertson, Jordan Kelly, some veterans there. So I like what they got in the interior D-line. Reggie Grimes, very interested to see what he can do because this pass rush, it's, at least from an edge perspective, it's not too great on paper. They do have Clayton Smith, a 38th ranked recruit, number 2 defensive end in his class from 2 years ago. Good bend off the edge, plays hard, some good length. He's showcased skills as an off-ball linebacker. Very interested to see what Smith can do in Brett Venables' scheme. It's a complex 4-3, 4-2-5. They're going to want to stop the run to get the safeties down in the box. Do they have the personnel to fit this scheme right away? Because they're going to want to play man coverage. And, big passing plays last year was an area of concern, and it probably will be this year as well. 109th against the pass. They were 120th rather, with 135 pass plays of 10-plus yards. A lot of guys were in space. Playmaking was not present in the secondary. I love the addition of Trey Morrison. Been working a lot with Jay Valai, the DB coach. I think he's probably going to be that hybrid guy that Venables likes to use, kind of like Andrew McCumba last year at Clemson. Key Lawrence, he can do the same. Spears Jenkins, he's got nice length and speed, 6'1", 200 incoming. They might carve out a role for him. I'm really looking at Woody Washington, DJ Graham, though. Woody was good when he was healthy, but he didn't play that much. Billy Bowman, he's a former top-ranked corner. He should fill that nickelback role. And then Justin Boyle's a veteran. So they got some players here on defense, Nick. They also get Deshaun White back at linebacker. It's probably the worst positional group on this roster at the moment. But T.D. Roof does come over. Ted's son, of course, comes over from Appalachian State. High-end producer there for the Mountaineers. Interesting defense. I think there's a lot of varying opinions here. They also got Isaiah Coe on the D-line as well. So they have some good depth. Got good players at all 3 levels, I feel like. But everyone seems to be very iffy on this unit. I'm right there in the middle with them. I think it'll be good enough to win 10 games in this conference, but how would they do in a New Year's 6 against like an SEC school?
I am certainly concerned about playing better squads later in the season. I think this is a solid defense. I like Jeffrey Johnson from Tulane. He had really strong production for the Green Wave. I think this is an exciting pickup for them. I liked him a lot in the portal. I was interested to see where he ended up. This is a great fit for me. Reggie Grimes, Jalen Redmond. I like all of them on the defensive line. Ethan Downs as well, young player, has some experience last year, not a whole lot produced from Downs, but I like to see him come on to the scene this year. I'm penciling him as a player that could definitely break out. He had 3 tackles for loss and a half sack last year, in addition to 14 total tackles for Downs. I like this defense. I like the coaching. I think Venables will have a hand in this. I think the 4-2-5 is a good kind of role for this team to play. I think they should switch to that and stick to that full time. I think this is a solid defense top to bottom. Trey Morrison's a solid pickup in the portal as well. I'd like to see him be involved, maybe throw him around wherever you really got to play him, honestly. He's a talented player. TD Roof as well, linebacker coming over from Appalachian State, like you noted, talented guy, hard hitter at Appalachian State. I think it's a good fit for him. This defense is good for the Big 12. I think in other conferences they would struggle, but for a Big 12 defense, it's a solid defense.
That's at least short-term. Long-term, I think Venables will do some great things for them. I have Oklahoma losing to Nebraska and Texas, and that moves us to second place. I have the Longhorns in the regular season coming in and runner-up. There's a lot of hype this year, Nick, because of what Steve Sarkisian's been able to do, not just in recruiting, but getting a guy like Quinn Ewers from the portal. Hudson Card, Casey Thompson, they battled it out last year, and, they couldn't really find their groove, really. But Bijan Robinson is here. Great vision. He's a good cutback runner, fits through creases with ease. He's the top running back in college football. 1,100 yards, 11 touchdowns last year. So at the top of the Heisman race early on in last year. And then, this team started losing. And then, production went down a bit. All downhill from there. Roshan Johnson, though, he's been a very reliable and productive number 2 back. 219-pounder, the former quarterback. 1,600-plus yards, 18 touchdowns on 3 seasons. Right under that 200-yard per game mark. As a team running the ball, they like Keelan Robinson. They also added 4-star Jalen Blue, one of the nation's top backfields. They're very deep. Quinn Ewers, though, great arm talent, dual threat type guy, former number 1 ranked recruit. We'll see what he can do. He gets an early test week 2 against Alabama. But I think overall, they're going to find ways to get him involved and get him the ball to his pass catchers. Ajayi Hall struggled with attitude a bit and the ability to catch last year at Alabama. He shows up here. Jalil Billingsley as well is an athletic 6'4", 216-pounder tight end. Another guy who didn't really do what we thought he would last year. He can be utilized in a variety of different ways. They reunite him with Stark here. I think Billingsley is going to play a major role here in this offense. They picked up Isaiah Neor, averaging nearly 20 yards per catch, almost 900 yards and 11 scores at Wyoming. Plenty of speed there. He's a physical pass catcher who'll be used in the red zone. Xavier Worthy shined as a true freshman. 6'1", 160, severely undersized, but this guy shakes opposing DBs like nothing. 61 grabs, almost 1,000 yards. He had 12 scores. Expected a breakout season from Jordan Whittington. He played very well before the injury. He was second on the team in recs and yards. Depth wasn't exactly great last year. It's not ideal this year. Marcus Washington transfers out. They also picked up Tariq Milton late. So Quint Ewers has plenty of weapons, Nick, at running back, at wide receiver. He's a former number 1 recruit. This offense could really explode this season with the offensive line. Long term, I think they'll be great because they've really recruited this position. But so far up front, those guys, there's nothing very promising about this unit. And it wouldn't be any better to get those 5-star freshmen involved, because that means that your veterans and leaders are not doing what their jobs is.
Quinn Ewers return to Texas. It always seemed like the fit in Ohio State didn't quite make a whole lot of sense. Kind of swindling out of some money when you think about it. Coming there and then transferring after just one season. The Southlake Carroll legend, one of the best prospects in terms of quarterbacks coming out of the state of Texas since Vince Young, arguably. Super talented quarterback. I love his potential. Very excited to see what he can do. The film is fantastic with him, and they also landed another great quarterback for the future in Arch Manning as well. The film on that quarterback, even better. Quinn Ewers in the short term is a super talented quarterback. I love his arm strength, love his decision making. I'm super excited to see what he can do. He's going to get to start early on. He's going to be the star here for the Longhorns. I love his potential. I'm excited to see. And it helps me have a guy like Xavier Worthy you can throw to. I think, like you said, a bit undersized, but I think he still has a lot of speed that makes up for it. Nearly 1,000 yards receiving last year, 15.8 yards per grab, and 12 touchdowns for Worthy. I love him coming back. I think he's super talented, underrated wide receiver, even though he put up nearly 1,000 yards last year. Whittington as well. I think if he can stay healthy, a solid guy to throw to. And then Bijan Robinson, when you have a back like that you can rely on, who's going to pick up ground yard every time he runs the ball, he's going to pick up some yards. 5.8 yards on the ground last year per carry. I love Bijan Robinson. The reason why people were buzzing him for a Heisman hype last year, he comes back. I think he's a solid player. As long as the offensive line can kind of hold its own and protect Ewers, protect Robinson, I think this Texas offense will be very strong this year.
Hayden Conner at guard had an impressive spring. Jake Majors, his second year here, he's going to slot in at center. The rest of the unit is really a puzzle. Plenty of young guys will be gunning for time early. I think the offensive line is really going to be a struggle bus unit for them this season, as will the defense. Pete Kodakowski's 4-2-5 scheme. They run a variety of schemes here, but that seems to be the main one. The defense flat out struggled, and I think it will again. They were 100th in sacks and in yards per game allowed. Third worst in rushing the passer in the conference. This D-line features the same guys I talked about last year, Nick. Keandre Coburn, Moro Ojomo, Alfred Collins. Coburn, 346. They're going to pair him up with Devondre Sweat, 6'4", 335. Some great size on the interior D-line. They're pretty solid with depth, but edge is a big question mark. Collins, he's going to have to step up, 6'5", 302. Not really built to come off the edge, and they're wanting him to do that anyways. So I think he might come back and play the inside this year, but if they're expecting him to be an edge rusher that big, I just don't see how that's going to work. Ovi Okahafu, 42 tackles. There might be something there. Burrow, Sorrell, likely to start as a former low-end 3-star, still a development player. Pass rush has major issues, Nick. No talent or depth. Long-term, that's going to be an area for recruiting for sure, because they didn't bring in anything that would make you think this defense is going to be any different this season other than two top 120 true freshmen, Justice Finkley, Jamin Tapp. I don't expect them to get on the field much this year. Middle of the defense has some heat, though. Demarion Overshone, explosive, nice closing speed, an instinctive middle linebacker who is, still learning his position. Far from an asset in coverage, but he's making some strides. 74 stops for him last year. Luke Brockermeyer, though, he was quite solid in coverage. 2 picks, also had 72 tackles. Jalen Ford, he was third on the team with 54 tackles. Led the team with 6 tackles for loss. This team really struggled to get in the backfield. They're going to have to blitz a good bit this fall. They don't exactly have fast, eager, bendy players to come off the edge, so they're going to have to win. They're going to have to win up the middle, Nick. I'm very concerned about this front seven.
I'm also very concerned about this front seven. I like to see Justin Finkley involved potentially early on. I know you said that he might not get the reps, but maybe he does as a former high recruit come in, a true freshman. I like to see him maybe involved. I think Coburn's a solid guy. I like him at nose tackle. But other than that, this team has a whole lot of questions marks for me on the front seven. I just don't see the production out of these guys. Alfred Collins, another guy I look at that has some production in the past. I think he has some decent numbers, 24 total tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 2 sacks from Collins. But in general, I worry about this front seven top to bottom. I think the linebacking core is weak. I think the interior defensive line is very weak. I'm a little bit concerned about this for sure.
You can say the same thing about the secondary. The 67% rate was 125th in FBS. They were 4th, though, nationally in 30-plus pass plays allowed, so they're quite good downfield. It's really impressive because they, again, had no pass rush. They also allowed 4 300-plus passers. They also ranked 114th against the run, though. The safety struggled to provide help in that category. Coverage was iffy. Had solid talent, so it was a big mystery on why these guys were so bad. The CBs, I think they were much better than the safety, but Ryan Watts, transfers from Ohio State to start along Deshaun Jameson, Anthony Cook. He was really good last season. Sure-handed tackler. He was impressive in coverage. They're looking to move him from slot to safety. They'll see how that goes. Keaton Crawford, he's got blazing speed. He had a good spring. Overall, they allowed 35 points per game in conference play, gave up 57 to Kansas. This defense was not good one bit, Nick. And short term, I think they're really long term. This is obviously going to be a big focal point. We'll see what happens. But for 2022, that's going to be the big reason why they don't beat an Alabama or contend for a CFP spot.
I agree. I think this defense will get blown out by the bigger teams like Oklahoma and Alabama on their schedule. Ryan Watts, solid player. I like him transferring to Ohio State. Didn't quite work out in Columbus. Good fit here for me. Anthony Cook, another talented player I like. But top to bottom, this defense really worries me. I just don't see the production here with this defense at all, and I think it's going to really struggle this year.
Good news is the offense should be able to, win shootouts or compete with anyone on that side of the ball. So we'll see what happens. Very interested to see what happens with Texas this season. Third place team for me, Kansas State. Chris Kleinman has an interesting bunch this year. They had Adrian Martinez from Nebraska, 27 touchdowns, nearly 3,400 yards. I think he's coming off his best career season at Nebraska, a dual threat guy. He's a great runner, makes a lot of plays on the move. Him and Deuce Vaughn are going to be tough to contain here, especially on the edge in the option game. Martinez, he has shown the ability to stand in the pocket, take a shot, deliver deep downfield with accuracy. Doesn't have a rocket arm by any means, and he's had 8+ interceptions all 3 years as a starter. So that's obviously a big part of his game he has to work on, and consistency with accuracy. I was watching the Purdue film, and the 3 picks he had against those guys were ridiculous. They shouldn't have happened. Deuce Vaughn, though, 1,800+ yards, 22 touchdowns last year, 5'6", 173. But he's as elite as they come with quickness and open field awareness. 6'1", 212. DJ Giddens, he's going to be the backup here. I like what they got at wide receiver, Nick. Phillip Brooks, he's a possession pass catcher. He's very quick as well. He's almost smaller than Vaughn is, 5'7", 163. Malik Knowles, the more heavy hitter of this pass-catching core. He's a great kick returner. 2 scores, hit 2 scores last year in the kick return game, 33 yards per return, so he's an explosive player as well. There's not great depth or size with these skill position players, but they make an impact, Nick. But you look at the offensive line, complete opposite. They have some nice depth and some great size. Cooper Beebe, 6'3", 320, one of the best run blockers in all of college football. Didn't allow much in the pass protection game either. KT Levelston, 6'4", 326. They lose 3 starters on the interior, so development of this group is going to be key. But they were 29th in FBS on third down. These guys like to control the ball. They live on explosive plays. Good offense on paper, but they need to stay healthy to be successful because they're not deep at running back or wide receiver. But if the starters stay healthy, I like this team's chances.
I like this offense a whole lot. The depth definitely concerns me when you guys have a guy like Deuce Vaughn. I'm not really too worried about it as much. Deuce Vaughn is such a talented back. 6 yards per carry last year, 18 touchdowns for him on the ground, plus 4 receiving touchdowns. He can do it both. Dual threat. I love Vaughn. Star offensive player to watch in this conference this year for me. I think Adrian Martinez got a lot of hate at Nebraska, but I think a lot of times some of those results weren't his fault. Yes, the turnovers need to come down. I definitely agree with that, but I think Adrian Martinez is a really solid quarterback. I love the dual threat ability there. I think Cooper Beebe, that's the type of guy you want to have on the offensive line. He's going to block for you. He's going to protect you. I love his, where he slots in there perfectly for me on that left tackle slot. I like to see him run to that side of the line a whole lot. Phillip Brooks, in the slot, I like his speed. Got some good experience last year. Excited for him. Malik Knowles as well. Dual threat with the receiving and the kicking receiving game, stuff like that. I like Knowles. Solid guy. Cade Warner as well. I think he's also got some potential in the wide receiver X role. I think this is a really fun offense. The depth definitely concerns me, but right now I'm really excited for this offense.
I really like the defense, too. 6 starters are back on a unit. They're ranked 3rd in yards per game allowed in the conference. Really like the defensive line as well. They're 31st in college football against the run. This pass rush got home most of the time without blitzing. The front 4 really gets after it, led by Felix Ozama, 14.5 tackles for loss, 11 sacks, 6 forced fumbles. That's pretty ridiculous. He's got a strong drive on the interior, gets low, powers through. Not a great get-off, but he's very fast. That's one thing I noticed about him. He's a violent hitter as well. If he worked on that get-off this offseason, guys are in trouble. Eli Huggins, he's been an important contributor for a few years now at defensive tackle. Jalen Pickle is back as well, the anchor down a defensive tackle spot. He's a senior. This 3-3-5 has been impressive. A veteran linebacker group here. Will Honus, he's a 7th-year player. He transfers over from Nebraska, much like Martinez, 124 tackles the past 2 seasons. They get back Khaled Duke. He's a long-term veteran as well. He struggled with health a good bit. He had an impressive start last season, though, then he got hurt in week 3. Daniel Green, though, a premier run stuffer, did good work as a blitzer for them as well. Rarely used in that department. He had 16.5 tackles for loss of his own as an attacking linebacker. I like what they got. This front 6 is really impressive, Nick. The biggest problem is, the scheme allows them to not get beat over top. They're 15th and 20+ yard pass plays allowed. The front 7 complemented them very well, but underneath coverage was a big struggle for these guys. 68% opponent completion rate. That's 127th in college football. Getting off the field was an issue for them. But EQ Boy Dow, 6 foot 170, he's a lockdown corner. He wasn't attacked much. Julius Brent, he's a veteran. He had 41 stops in his first year as a starter. They replace 3 starters. They lose 3 starters, but they add 3 DBs from the portal. Kobe Savage from JUCO, Josh Haynes. He was with Chris Kleiman at North Dakota State. You got TJ Smith, the second year starter at safety. And then Sean Robinson, the former quarterback, comes over from Missouri. They're looking to get some good things out of him. So I think if this secondary can progress like we think it should, then this front 6 will lead them home. This is probably one of the bigger sleeper teams in all of college football because they have a lot of potential.
I love the potential this Kansas State team has. I think Kobe Savage, solid guy. Josh Hayes as well. I like to see what he can do. Sean Robinson converted to linebacker, solid linebacker as well. Kelly Duke, as long as he can stay healthy, I think he's got some serious potential. Azuma as well. I love what he can do. The stats on him are ridiculous. Super talented guy. I mean, 14.5 tackles for loss and 11 sacks is a ridiculous number for him. Daniel Green as well, 16 tackles for a loss. Nice numbers for him. Led the team in tackles last year, 89 total tackles. It's a solid defense I'm really excited for.
They added in total 9 transfers on the defensive side of the ball from a unit that was already pretty solid. So they obviously had some talent and some depth. Very impressive stuff by Kleiman. I think this is certainly their year to get things done. Looking at our 4th place team, 3, they lose a good bit on all areas of the football team, but overall, Jim Knowles included, but I think on offense, you get Spencer Sanders, whose ceiling has kind of been reached. Last year, I think he's a good fit for this offense. With the pistol set, they like to get him out of the pocket. That's where he makes his best plays. His negative tendencies still show, making bad decisions like interceptions. That was a big thing against Baylor. Over half of his picks on the season came against the Bears. The Texas game, they didn't want to commit to running the ball. This offensive game plan sometimes is very frustrating, but overall, when Sanders is red hot, this offense clicks. 2,800 yards, 20 touchdowns last year, ran for 664 and 6 more scores. I think the biggest thing about this offense is they really had to adapt under Sanders, and he hasn't been that good for them because it used to be a high-flying passing attack. We haven't really seen that much. We've seen more of a hard-nosed running game, tough defense. We got great work last year out of 2 transfers in Martin and Warren. Both shine for them, but now they're gone. The backfield isn't as deep. Dominic Richardson's back, 6 foot 210, fits the mold of this running game. Good size, quality second and third options here. DeAndre Jackson and Jaden Nixon. Nixon's much smaller, much quicker than the other 2 guys, but on the field a good bit this year. Number of recruits from the class of 2021 at pass catcher, Nick, who will make an impact. John Paul Richardson, Rashad Owens, Jaden Bray, Bryson Green. 5 of the top 8 wide receivers last year in terms of production were freshmen. They're going to be joining Brandon Presley. He's a really good player. Made too many mistakes for my liking late in the year. Fumbled near the end zone. A lot of things he needs to clean up. Very high point for a guy who's 5'8", very shifty, athletic pass catcher. I like what they got wide receiver overall. And then offensive line. I think this is an interesting group to watch because depth isn't great, but they do have some vets coming back in Cole Birmingham, Preston Wilson. Those guys are versatile. Tyrone Rebber, he's a JUCO player they are going to watch. And Caleb Etienne, he was also a guy from the JUCO cycle last year, 6'7", 325. More consistent pass protection is a key for me this year. I don't think this offense will fall off too much, but I do think that the running game with Jalen Warren, they lose an explosive, tough back. I think if Spencer Sanders can give them what we want him to do, I think this offense will be really good. They'll be clicking. Nick, what are your thoughts?
I like this offense a lot. I think there is some potential here. I get a little concerned with Sanders. I think he definitely has met his ceiling. The turnovers worry me a whole lot. 12 interceptions, just too many for him. He needs to cut that down. I like his running ability, like the dual threat. He needs to pick up on that this year for sure. The running game is going to require a lot of him considering the running back core is a little weak, although Dominic Richardson's not that bad of a running back to have as your starting guy. I think Brandon Presley as well. As long as he can cut down on the turnovers, things like that, should be a solid wide receiver to have. This offensive line is solid. I like how they have a lot of leadership, a lot of experience on the offensive line. This offense will be strong this year. I like the way they go. I think the coaching kind of helps that a lot. I think Sanders is a strong quarterback, good arm. As long as he keeps the turnovers at a minimal, I think this offense will be high flying.
Now we look at the defense. Jim Knowles departs, and so do a handful of guys in the secondary at linebacker, but this defensive line remains largely intact, and they even get better with the return of Trace Ford. They led the nation in sacks per game, 56 of them on the year, which was second. Bama played one more game than them, so they had one more sack that gave them that lead. But Colin Oliver, a guy I named last year as a true freshman to watch, and they needed some pass rushing help, and he emerged as a star. 10.5 sacks, 15.5 tackles for loss. Brock Martin, 9 sacks. Tyler Lacey, 9.5 tackles for loss. This group who shine each and every week. Some weeks they all shine. One week it'd be Oliver, the other would be Lacey. 2 seniors on the interior D-line. They're really stout on that group. Ranked 5th nationally against the run. These guys were so good. They do lose Malcolm Rodriguez and Devin Harper at linebacker, though. That's 226 tackles worth of production gone. Not only that, but they love to blitz those guys. They got home a lot. variety of different ways they use those guys to attack. Xavier Benson, he comes over from Texas Tech. This is a really fresh, young group of linebackers. Derek Mason, the new defensive coordinator, typically gets strong play out of his backers, so we'll see who it benefits most. 4-2-5 scheme really allowed the secondary to thrive, though. If you got an elite pass rush, then it really helps those guys be great. And it did last year, but the secondary still had its issues. They allowed only a 57% comp rate, 210 yards. Not the greatest numbers. Very quality work, though. DBs kept a lot of things in front of them. The only two vets that are returning, Jabbar Muhammad, Jason Taylor. I think Thomas Harper's going to slide into the lineup this year as well. He had 20 stops a season ago. I really like this defense. I'm very interested to see what happens at linebacker and at secondary. I think the lack of athleticism at linebacker, it's going to hurt them a little bit, but I think this defensive line certainly lead the charge. 9-3 for me, Nick. I think Oklahoma State, despite losing a lot, right there in contention yet again.
I like this Oklahoma State defense. I think that replacing Jim Knowles is difficult, but I think Derek Mason's a good hire. Took a pay cut to move. Derek Mason took a pay cut to move to Stillwater. I like the move here. I think Derek Mason's a solid defensive coordinator. People kind of forget that, considering his time at Vanderbilt and how much of a mess it was in Auburn last year. I like the fit here. I'm excited for it. Colin Oliver, the stats don't lie with him. 15.5 tackles for loss, 10.5 sacks. Super strong guy. I love the sort of production they have. Yes, they replace a whole lot. I think they get enough production back. Brock Martin as well, solid player to get back. Xavier Benson, I like him in the portal. This is a strong defense. This team should definitely contend in the Big 12 again. Definitely wouldn't be surprised they go back to the title game.
Now looking at the rest of the conference, Iowa State's Matt Campbell enters his 7th season, denies some big-time coaching opportunities in the offseason to stay here. It's going to be his biggest year, though. Big-time challenge. They lose a lot of production, loses a 4-year starter at quarterback, big-time running back in Breece Hall. Hunter Deckers takes up. He got some time against Oklahoma. Very small sample size, but he was not impressive. Did not play with much confidence one bit. He's a former 4-star, though, I believe. And he's got a nice little group of weapons. Drill Brock, Deion Salas. We'll see which one of those guys step up at running back. But under Campbell, they've had running backs that play with a lot of heart. So I expect the same thing out of those guys. Xavier Hutchinson, Jalen Noel, some solid, respectable pass catchers there. And Dimitri Stanley as well. They picked him up in the portal. Sheen Shaw, a senior as well. So I think they got some really good weapons at wide receiver. Trevor Downey, he's going to lead a veteran offensive line that Matt Campbell is very happy with. I think that he's never had this much praise during his tenure here at Iowa State about this offensive line. Defense, there's only 3 notable guys that get back. Will McDonald, the defensive end, who's going to compete for Defensive Player of the Year. Orion Vance at linebacker. And then Anthony Johnson, a guy who's going to move to safety. And they expect big things out of all 3 of those guys. So those are going to be the leaders. You got guys like MJ Anderson, Colby Reeder, some transfers that are going to step up. I think Bayou Fryler, a rising sophomore here at safety, he's going to be another breakout player to watch. Iowa State 7-5. I think this has been Oklahoma's kryptonite the last couple of years. They've really competed. Anytime they lose a game, it's never by more than 14 points, it seems. Baylor, the reigning conference champion, 7-5 for me. I think they really got their hands full. They lose 2 strong runners. They also lose a lot at wide receiver. Blake Shapen, I was very impressed with him late in the year when he got to go at quarterback. Defensively, they lose so much athleticism in the secondary. They lose 3 or 4 starters overall. I still like the defensive line, though. They added Jackson player from Tulsa. They're going to match him up with Siaka Ika. I think this team is probably one of the best when it comes to being in the trenches, not just on defense, because Gabe Hall at defensive end, he's really solid. TJ Franklin, they got some depth there. But on the offensive line, they had Connor Galvin, Grant Miller, Jacob Gall. These guys are seniors. They're big and nasty. Baylor is one of the nation's best in the trenches, but I think there's a lot of losses on defense. Obviously, this is Dave Aranda's specialty, so I think they're going to get things going, but they will not be the same force that Tay McWilliams, Craig Williams at running back. We'll see what those guys can do. I think they got some good speed. I like Monterey Baldwin at wide receiver. Overall, I think Baylor's going to take a step back this year just because I think the talent is not up to par like it was last year. What are your thoughts on those 2 teams?
Yeah, I think Iowa State's a fun team to watch. I'm excited to see what they can do. I like the production they have on offense. Yes, they replaced their quarterback, and yes, they replaced Breece Hall at running back. But I think that they have decent guys coming in to fill those holes. They always run hard. They always run heavy. At Iowa State, I think that's a solid Cyclones team, solid defense as well. I think Will McDonald's a great player to watch, should be in the running for defensive player of the year. And then you look at Baylor, they replace a lot on defense. That definitely concerns me. I like the offensive side of the ball. Their offensive line is very strong, very physical. I love that potential there. I think this is a solid Baylor Bears team, but I think they're just going to take a step back because the defense really concerns me. They could find themselves off the pace in a few games because the defense may not be up to snuff. But these are 2 solid programs that definitely to watch in the Big 12 that can make some noise.
For Baylor, I think the passing offense and passing defense will be 2 struggle areas for them. That doesn't mean they'll be terrible. I do think they'll regress from last year. Look at TCU. This could really be a sleeper team. Picked up Sonny Dykes from SMU, so they're going to implement a high-flying offense. They're pretty deep at running back. Max Duggan's a gamer at quarterback. This is like his 4th year. I love what they got at wide receiver, led by Quentin Johnson, Darius Davis. Those are some really good guys. Defense, though, these guys were absolutely horrid last year. They obviously returned a lot of good players, though. Mark Perry comes over from Colorado. Noah Daniels, Travius Hodges-Tomlinson, a pretty solid cornerback duo. And then D. Winters was a standout at linebacker. But overall, the defense has many steps to take. Sonny Dykes, he's obviously an offensive-minded head coach. His defense has never been too solid. They did pick up some good, nice transfers, though, and we'll see what happens there for TCU. I think that could be a team that sneaks in 8 or 9 wins. And then Texas Tech, I like what they got going there. Joey McGuire comes over. They hire Zach Kitley as well. Tim DeRuiter. Very nice staff that Texas Tech put together. Just for short term, though, I don't know what they're going to be able to do. Tyler Shaw, Donovan Smith, a very interesting quarterback battle. But the defense has been just atrocious. 30-plus points per game allowed for the last decade. So I don't know if they're going to be able to fix that immediately. A lot of youth at wide receiver. Some nice running backs, though, led by Sherrod Thompson. So I like Texas Tech for 4-8 for me. I do have them beating the Longhorns, though. I think the high-flying offense is going to be too much for a defense that does not have much depth. West Virginia, Nick, a team I'm going 4-8, but I think this team can certainly make a bowl game. Dante Still is one of the top defensive tackles there. Overall, pretty sound defense for the Mountaineers. JT Daniels reunites with Graham Harrell to be on the offensive side of the ball. They also get back Bryce Ford Wheaton. And they have a pretty deep backfield as well. So I think West Virginia, that's a team that's kind of like TCU, another sleeper one. I just think they're going to lose a lot of close games this year. Then Kansas, I like what Lance Leopold's doing there. I think, they were not exactly a punching bag last year. They competed. They beat Texas, led Oklahoma for, deep into the second half. So I'm interested to see what Kansas does. But, they still allowed 40-plus points per game last year. And that's going to be a long-term project. I don't think I expect much from them. Back to West Virginia 1 second. They added a lot of transfers on defense. Not much on the offensive side of the ball, but they do return a handful of notable guys. And I think Tony Mathis will be a breakout star at running back. So I think West Virginia, TCU, those are some of the wild cards we have here on the bottom of the conference. Overall, the Big 12, it's probably going to be one of the worst conferences in terms of Power 5, but I do think that Oklahoma, Texas, Kansas State, those three can compete for a potential playoff bid. But overall, depth isn't great. I do think there'll be a lot of competition, though.
I do agree with the competition aspect. TCU, I like Sonny Dykes, great hire there. I love the way that offense is going to look over time. I just think short term, this team's average to above average at best. I think the defense is poor. I don't really know what they're going to go there. Max Duggan, solid quarterback. Texas Tech as well. I like the hires they made. I think they're building in the right direction at Texas Tech. Had a weird, interesting about 10 years or so in Lubbock. I'm interested to see what this program can do over the short term and long term. West Virginia program I like a whole lot. Hate to have them at 4-8. Dante Still is one of my favorite players in the conference. Super talented player. The stats he put up last year just showing that he has so much potential. I love Stills. I'm excited for that. JT Daniels, great fit. Excited to see them play Pitt again this year for the first time in a while. I like the transfers, and on the defense, I think the offense has some talent as well. Kansas, they aren't the punching bag they used to be. This team does have a fight in it. I do think that the coaching staff is strong there. I think they're heading in the right direction, but I think it's just going to be a tough season this year because there's a lot of teams that are better in the Big 12 than Kansas, but they could upset a few teams here and there. You never know with this Kansas Jayhawks team. A lot of wild cards there. The bottom of the conference has some interesting storylines, but these teams are just not that great.
Look at our conference title and order predictions. I'm rooting for Kansas State, but being unbiased, I do have the Sooners getting revenge on Texas there in Arlington to cap things off. I do have Texas beating Kansas State. I think they're going to have the passing attack's going to be too much for that secondary that day. Should be a really fun game, though. Speaking of Defensive Player of the Year, just said Dante Stills. He's going to have a great year. I think Will McDonald from Iowa State's really going to have a big-time season. He's going to anchor that defense. It's got a lot of youth. He's going to force a lot of fumbles. He's going to get a lot of sacks. We both are in agreement with Deuce Vaughn. Nearly 1,900. He had over 19. I think he had almost 1,900 total yards last season. And you add Adrian Martinez, who's going to make him even harder to defend. So we both have him winning Offensive Player of the Year. Quinn Ewers, unanimous newcomer of the season, coming over from Ohio State, former #1 recruit. Plenty of weapons to work with. Coach of the Year for me, Chris Kleiman, because I think Kansas State 9-3. It's going to be a big mark for them. I think their over/under win total is like 6 or 7, so I think they're certainly going to exceed expectations. Their defense will shine. I think if their offense stays healthy, it'll be fun to watch too. Brent Venables, you have him as Coach of the Year, coming over and winning a conference title with Oklahoma. I think that the Sooners, this team is probably one of the worst teams they've had over the last couple of years long term. I love the fit. Thought he was one of the best hires on the season. I have Jeffrey Johnson, their defensive tackle, coming over from Tulane, being a big breakout star. And you have Darren Wilson for Iowa State. Love to get your analysis of that. And overall, what are your final thoughts on Oklahoma? Because this is a team I'm not really keen on, but looking at like I said at the top of the show, the schedule is not ideal, and they are still a little bit more talented than the other guys, and the offensive philosophy is going to be too tough to defend.
I think Oklahoma is not. This is not the best Oklahoma roster in the world, but I think Brent Venables was the right hire. I love the potential he has. I'm excited to see what he can do. I just think that they're better on paper than anyone else in the conference. They should win the conference for me this year. I think they have a lot of question marks. Though recruiting's gonna be bigger for the next 2 seasons. They're gonna have to replace Dylan Gabriel at some point. They're gonna have to get those offensive weapons back. Recruit wide receivers heavy again. I like this team right now. I think they'll win the conference, but the 2 losses for them will certainly knock them out of playoff contention, and they'll just be in near 6 bowl at some point. I do think Darren Wilson is someone that people are sleeping on. I think he has a real opportunity to break out. I think Iowa State will be a lot better than some people expect. Wilson had 12 receptions last year, good for 114 yards, 9.5 yards per catch. I think he's going to has potential to double those receptions this year. I'm excited for Wilson. I think he has some serious potential. I like him as a wide receiver coming out of Iowa State. I like to see him get involved early on. He's going to be my breakout star because my sleeper team is Iowa State. We touched on them earlier. I'm excited for Iowa State. I know they replace a lot in offense, but I think the guys they're bringing in have some potential here. This team could be very good next year. This is sort of a transition year for Iowa State, but I do like what direction the Cyclones are heading.
Yeah, I mean, Iowa State, that offensive line, they're big, physical, and again, I touched on the running backs. Hunter Deckers, we'll see what he can provide, but the offense might really shock some people, even though they lose a good bit. And then the defense, they've been very sound over the past couple of years under Matt Campbell. And Baylor's a sleeper team for me. I know I kind of bashed on them because they lose a lot, but they're very physical in the trenches on both sides. Probably the nation's best O-line, D-line combo. And, they produced a lot at the skill positions, but Blake Shapen was very impressive last year. Now he's getting some experience and some confidence under his belt. He could really lead them there. And despite losing a lot on defense, Dave Aranda, he is very good at being a defensive coach, and he could really shock some people. It was a big reason why they were so good last year, despite missing the postseason just 2 years ago. So Baylor for me, Iowa State for you. Even though Kansas State, I'm really high on them. I don't really consider them a sleeper team at 9-3. This is our predictions, Nick. Very fun conference this year. I don't think they'll have a college football playoff bid, but if Texas can shake things up week 2, then it'll be a very interesting season. Don't expect it to happen, but college football is the greatest sport on earth. So Nick, as always, I appreciate you joining me.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This conference, interesting conference, like the kind of direction this conference is heading. I think Oklahoma and Texas will be strong over the next couple of seasons with both strong coaching hires over the last 2 seasons.
This will be the final year before they add BYU, Cincinnati, and Houston, and then another team as well. So this should be fun. New look Big 12 before Oklahoma and Texas get to depart. But plenty of storylines, plenty to look forward to. That's going to be it, guys. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.